As I mentioned, tonight's e-symposium is on 4-H chaperones. Do you know your responsibilities? And we have run this webinar, this e-symposium before. We did it actually last fall as a lot of the dairy and beef teams were gearing up for the Rural Agriculture Winter Fair. We had really good response from that webinar, and opted then to include it into our 2019 Learning Opportunities series, and to put it earlier in the year, knowing that there are a lot of day trips, a lot of even other shows and events going on that do require chaperones, not just at the Royal, but throughout the whole year. So. Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining, and we'll get started. I'll pause periodically throughout the webinar if anyone has questions, and hopefully, if you want to save your question or you think of something after we've kind of gone through it, and want to spend some time at the end of the evening, I'll certainly make myself available for that as well. So as you all know, 4-H is a positive youth development organization, and we do strive to employ that, it is a positive experience for the youth, but we also want to make it a positive experience for our volunteers as well. And we have a wide variety of people who fall into being volunteers. So we've got our club leaders, and many of you may be club leaders. We have volunteers who sit on the association or have roles on the association. And also we have chaperones, people that may chaperone a Go for the Gold team. They may chaperone the East Gen team. They may chaperone the Rural Agriculture Winter Fair. They may chaperone any number of events. So it's always important to define or to understand what a chaperone is. And this is actually from our policy, our 4-H Ontario policy, where we define a chaperone as a current 4-H Ontario screened and engaged volunteer who supervises youth at 4-H related activities outside of the traditional 4-H club work. So again, we've got our club leaders that are part of the club and the meetings that happen on a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly basis. A chaperone would be somebody who is outside of that realm. Sometimes a club leader will also be a chaperone, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a club leader. What we do require, though, is that our chaperones are indeed screened and trained. So we've also classed two different types of chaperones. So we have our day chaperones. That would be if you were taking a bus trip. I know some beef teams will sometimes go to the Elmira Research Station or the University of Guelph. Some dairy clubs will take in similar types of excursions. Some of the field crop clubs will take in, in the east, maybe the Hastings Plowing Match or the International Plowing Match. So those would be those day events that, you're leaving in the morning and you're back home in the evening. We also have our overnight chaperones, and so those would be any time that there is an overnight stay at a hotel, camping, anything that requires the group, or the group is basically away from home overnight. So there are some requirements that we ask of all of our chaperones, and one of those is that they are a volunteer in good standing, as defined by the 4-H Ontario policy O-V-14, which describes the volunteer in good standing. It's also important to remember that an individual cannot be a participant and a chaperone at the same event or activity. And so that takes, really to explain that would be a 19 or a 20 or a 21-year-old youth attending an event. They would not be in a position to chaperone that event. So they're either attending or they're chaperoning. I would prefer them to be attending, because we do like to see our chaperones to be a little bit older, and certainly I think we have a minimum of 3 to 5 years that we require them to be older than the youngest or the oldest the oldest participants. So again, just a reminder that that whoever is chaperoning, you want to make sure that they're, they are fulfilling that role of a chaperone, and not trying to basically do double duty. So chaperones must comply with responsibilities identified in the position description for their position. And we do have those cited on our 4-H Ontario website. You can also refer to the 4-H Ontario policy O-V-12. So whatever has been outlined in that position description, if it's a 4-H Ontario event, we will certainly have listed the roles and responsibilities that we expect, that we need to have fulfilled in any chaperones that we have. And so chaperones that 4-H Ontario would be those that would be going on to national events. We do require that they meet our standards. And then if it's a local event, you probably would want to have your own set of a position description and notes and responsibilities identified for anything that you're doing locally. So just some basics just to review. We do require that there be a minimum of 2 chaperones for the first 10 participants, and then after that, in increments going up from there. At least one of those chaperones must be 25 years of age before January 1st of the current year, and then each additional chaperone must be at least 3 years older than the oldest youth participant, and that was something I had referenced a few minutes ago. And then there must also be an additional chaperone for each additional 10 participants. So I'm just going to pause there. Are there any questions with regards to those requirements? Wow, you're all so quiet. Okay, so we'll carry on then. So we do require that our chaperones comply with all 4-H Ontario policies. Of particular interest are these ones that are listed, but I want to reference that they have to comply with all of our 4-H Ontario policies. These are the ones that are most pertinent to the role of a chaperone. So our positions of trust, and that is again defined in our policy O-V-02. Really what we're looking at there is keys, cash, and kids. And so the kids fall into the position of trust there. Our code of conduct, it is part of the participant agreement form that as 4-H volunteers and chaperones are required to sign. And we do require all of our 4-H youth to sign that code of conduct as well. So those would be 2 things that you would want to make sure that you had with you. Billeting, there's our policy that talks about that. Alcohol and drugs, that one has been updated and does reflect the new legislation that came in around marijuana usage, and particularly the medicinal marijuana. And then as part of an inclusive organization, the OHS-5, accessibility for persons with disabilities, the customer service policy, again, would be one that we would ask that our chaperones be very familiar with. So again, I'm just going to pause to see if anyone has any questions around those policies. Okay. I'll move on then. So we really want to spend some time highlighting our duty of care. This is something that we have had in place now for several years, and it is something that we cover off at each and every new volunteer orientation, so that everyone has an understanding of what the duty of care is. So the safety and protection of our volunteers and youth participants is of utmost importance. And I think what's key there is we talk about volunteers and we talk about youth. Um, Chaperones should plan programming with safety as a priority. Programs should be planned in such a way that eliminate situations where there would be access to a youth in private by an adult. And this includes transporting members to and from 4-H activities. In this way, we are taking steps to ensure that no harm comes to a youth by an adult, as well as to avoid false accusations. And again, I'm just going to pause there and go back. So if you've been asked to chaperone, chaperone an event, we would certainly ask that you do that programming, do your planning, keeping safety, keeping risk management top of mind as a priority, and in doing so, minimizing and eliminating any situations where there would be access to a youth in private by an adult. And as it does say here, including transporting members to and from activities. Many of us have done it. Maybe all of us have done it. If you have been transporting your own children, and a 4-H member needs a ride, okay. But if you're picking up a 4-H youth on the way to a meeting by yourself, we do strongly discourage you doing that. Any questions?
So you can take 2, but you can't take 1.
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, ideally, yeah, two, as long as the 2 of them are always together. It can't be 2 that you're going to drop off and still have one to drop off. Now, if you happen to have children, accompanying you and your child is with you, then that's a different story. But just always eliminating that risk of being one-on-one with a child.
Okay.
And for the most part, that really is around. It's protection for the youth, but the other thing is it certainly will avoid any false accusations that may come if somebody just sees something. It just makes it cleaner for everyone.
Okay.
So safety of youth is indeed a priority. We just talked about transportation. I'm not going to go over that, but just a reminder that transportation is just one incident where you may have found yourself in the past on a one-on-one situation, and we just ask that you avoid that situation and any others where you would come into contact one-on-one with the youth. Supervision, again, number 1 priority, ensuring that everyone engages as a group. In that, it's making sure that all the youth that are on that field trip, on that team, whatever, that they are engaging as a group and no one's being left kind of at the on the sidelines. Again, going back to that positive youth experience, you do want to make sure that opportunities that come for our youth are indeed positive. That is what will grow the youth in confidence. We also want to be mindful that there are people out there that will target youth, and they will target youth that are being excluded, kind of on the fringes, working by themselves. And so always making sure that the group is engaging together. Event audiences. So again, with safety as a priority, you're an event, with your 4-H members, be cognizant of the audience around. Again, not everyone is friendly. Not everyone is respectful. Respectful to youth, and respectful of activities. And I'm going to cough. Excuse me. And activities that that our youth are engaged in. We do live in a world where there is a lot of, audiences that have very different interpretations, very different perspectives, and so just always being cognizant, at events, that that again your youth are your youth are protected. Privacy is a very important aspect of safety for for youth, and the other piece around that goes to, excuse me, the positive attitude towards all youth and the chaperone activity. Um, any questions about anything around this slide and the safety of youth? So I will just back up and just reiterate with the privacy piece. That really goes back to our privacy statement, and around being cognizant, if youth have signed the media release that is part of the participant agreement form. If they haven't, being mindful then that they do not wish to have their pictures shared out, their pictures taken, the pictures shared out on social media. Um, and again, just being cognizant of that most of our youth will certainly will have signed that, or the parents will sign on their behalf, but it is important that we be mindful of those that choose not to, and be respectful. Be respectful of that. So when we speak about the role of chaperones, always finding that it's beneficial to spend some time, in advance, with the youth, and addressing some of these, these questions, some of these situations. So, what should the youth be expecting? For some, this could be their first time, their first time traveling. It could be their first time to the Rural Agricultural, winter fair. It could be their first time, with any, with anything, maybe going to a conference. So what should the youth be expecting? And kind of seeing where you're going through the lens of that youth and that first time. And therefore, you can help with the youth and alleviating any fears or any concerns, by addressing that. Schedules. We've talked about transporting youth. Again, really important that pick up points and meeting places and locales be arranged in advance, and the youth and their parents, their guardians, made aware of that schedule. And sometimes it needs to go out in 2 or 3 different ways. So you can talk to a parent or a guardian and youth. Maybe want to email it out, and you may even want to then even do another follow-up email as you get closer to the event. Again, just make sure that everyone is aware of pickup times and drop-offs. What's really important is that a youth is not kind of left standing by the side of the road for a pickup. The parent understanding or thinking that it was a 7:30 pickup and you're not going to be there until 8 o'clock. And vice versa, coming home from an event, if you are going to be arriving a little early, most youth now will have cell phones, or you could allow the youth to use your cell phone to call home just to say what I'm going to be arriving a little bit earlier. If that doesn't work, then it is responsibility of the chaperone to stay until all youth have been picked up by the parents or their guardians. Reviewing the code of conduct is important because it does make sure that everyone understands and has responsibility for enacting and ensuring that their behavior is according to that code of conduct. So yes, everyone signs it with their participant agreement form at the beginning of the year. Doesn't hurt to review it on a regular basis so that the youth know that you take that seriously and they need to take that seriously, and that if there are situations where there is some inappropriate behavior, they will be held accountable to that code of conduct. I think having discussion around the expectations of youth involvement is is important. If you are going as a team, whether it's a go for the gold, whether it's the Lego competition in the north, whether you're going to the East Gen Challenge, or um, you're going to going to the Royal. If you're working as a team, it's really important that be stressed. And one of the things about working with a team is working as a group, staying as a group, completing the shifts, completing the roles and responsibilities that come along with the reward of the opportunity to be participating. And then certainly reviewing risk management issues. We don't always see the situation. We're very focused on whatever it is that we're doing, but it is important to kind of stop and do a review of those possible risks, whether they're in transportation, whether they're in health, whether they're in conduct, whether it's whatever it is a multitude of things, just to kind of take that moment and to reflect, and to review with with the youth. They might not always know or even think about some of the risks that may be involved in running in a barn, with cattle, or on the slippery wet floor. So always just reminding them is really key as well. And the other piece around sharing with the youth and sharing with parents is your contact information, so that they can reach out to you if they're running a bit late. You can reach out to them, and they have a sense that if in any situation come up, family emergency, that they could reach out to you, to be that contact for their youth. Questions about the roles of the chaperone? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking now about the difference between a chaperone and a parent. So as a chaperone, you have the responsibilities for all youth that are part of the activity. And this includes treating all youth fairly and respectfully. So I think that's really something to keep in mind. There's many times that you will go to an event as as a parent, and as a parent, you have a responsibility then for your child. But when you go as a chaperone, you have responsibility for all the youth that are there. That also includes your child. And it is important that, as chaperones, you do and you are seen as treating all youth fairly and respectfully. So it is parents that are responsible for the authority of their own children. I think it's important that be distinguished. Those two roles be distinguished. We certainly do encourage parental support and engagement. However, again, we just want to stress that only those persons that are volunteers in good standing can serve as a chaperone. Just want to spend a bit of time just talking about those contrasting cultures. And so the slide here has the image of a farm in the forefront, and the skyscrapers and big buildings in representing the urban culture in behind. And I think part of the role that a chaperone has is reminding the members of the need to understand the importance of being part of a team when they're traveling together. Again, sometimes this can be the first time that a youth is traveling, perhaps without their families, and it seems like a great big adventure. But again, this goes back to having those conversations around risk management and the importance of staying together as a group, not wandering off by by themselves. It's also an opportunity for them to understand the diversity in cultures that they are likely to experience, maybe more so than what they would on the rural side roads as well. So it is a great learning opportunity. But again, it goes back to having those conversations, making sure that everyone is comfortable going forward. So we have some reminders, some B things. So be engaged in the activity. It is not intended to be a vacation. If you think that, as chaperone, that, basically what you're going to do is you're going to drop the kids off at point A in the morning and come back to that same point later on in the day, and in the interim, go to the spa or go shopping. That is not the case. You do need to be engaged in the activity, whatever that activity is. You also need to be positive about the opportunity and about your own involvement in that activity. If you're not positive, the youth are going to pick up on that, and they will not have a positive experience, either. So I mean, if understanding that everyone has off days, but it is important to be positive about what you're doing. If you have taken on the role of a chaperone, be positive about it, be happy about it. If you've taken it on and you're not, and you let that be known, then that has a ripple effect in many different directions. We ask that you be aware, of the surroundings and the circumstances at all. We've talked a bit about that with the cultures that going from rural to urban, being around, if it's a large urban style event, the audiences, and just being mindful of the large and different audiences, and the different perspectives that those audiences have. Respectful of situations and involving youth, and then willing to address conflict in a respectful manner. And that conflict can be youth to youth. It can be youth to other volunteers. It can be youth to organizers. It can be youth to to audience. And so, again, just being willing to address that conflict in a respectful manner. It's not going in with guns blazing. It's going in to just basically distill the moment, and then have the conversation respectfully on both sides. It's always a challenge when you're dealing with a challenging situation, but I think it's always important to remember that we are all icebergs, and icebergs, not that we're frigid by any stretch of the imagination, but we're icebergs because what we see in a situation is really only 10%. The rest of it is well below the surface, just like an iceberg is. So we only really see a small portion of each other. And that's where I think it's really important that when you do get into those situations, you start kind of looking below the surface to try and understand what could have caused that situation to kind of boil over with somebody. Yeah, and I'm just going to stop and ask if there's any questions. If you find yourself, go ahead. Was there a question? If you find yourself as a chaperone in a situation where there has been an incident, somebody has been, there's been a physical injury, we do ask that you complete an incident report, and that you forward it to 4-H Ontario within 48 hours of that incident. And we kind of make the rule for completing these incident forms if there is blood, if there is bones, and if there is brain. So blood, if somebody has cut themselves, they've got a gash on their leg, their foot, anything where if there is blood and certainly a deal of it, bones broken, protruding, and brains being concussion. So those are the three main, I guess, triggers for completing an incident report. However, I will also say that not all incidences are going to be physical. And so if there has been a situation that you have observed or a youth has come to you with, you may want to use this form to make note of that, and again send it in to 4-H Ontario within the 48 hours. And that 48 hours is the time frame that we have currently to forward it on to our insurance to open up a file. And therefore, if there's any follow-up, if there's has been a physical injury, they will do some follow-up then on a regular basis. See if there is going to be a claim or what can be done. So again, I'm just going to pause because this next piece I'm going to get your involvement. So I just want to pause, see if there's any questions that anyone has to this point.
I'm just wondering if you also want, say, an allergic reaction to be reported.
Yes. Absolutely, yes. That is a good question, yes.
I asked that.
Or a disobedience or something.
Who was allergic to grass, which was not a good mix for the club.
Absolutely, and we would hope that those are the sorts of things that would be put forth on a participant agreement form, but sometimes parents don't think of that. Thinking that it's going to take the activity is going to take place in the building, and they may not be aware. But absolutely, I mean, and that's why it's even important. It's very important to have those participant agreement forms to be able to cite those those types of of allergies as well. But certainly, yes, if there's an allergic reaction, a bee sting, anything like that. I said we kind of use that rule of thumb, the 3 Bs, but anything should be recorded and sent to us. I think there was another question around filling out this
disobedience or property damage or something like that.
Property damage, absolutely, because then that goes back from third party liability as well. So yes, as far as inappropriate behavior, that can be addressed right back through the code of conduct, as well. However, if you want to make a report of it, have it on on your files, absolutely, that would be great. Okay. So I'm going to get you thinking about some situations now, and I'll get you into it. So the first scenario is that you have been asked to chaperone a team of youth to the Rural Agriculture Winter Fair. This is the first time that the youth have been to the Rural Agriculture Winter Fair, and so the question then is, what conversations should you have with the parents and with the youth? Any thoughts?
Well, I would want to point out to them just the vast number of people that can be there. This is not a small attended event. There's thousands and thousands of people given the day. And another thing would be to be respectful of the non-rural youth who are attending and perhaps make statements or comments that we know aren't correct, but not to mock or make fun, but to be there as an ambassador of 4-H and to educate and not be derogatory in any way.
Absolutely, and I can't actually tell who actually brought that forward, but whoever it was, thank you. Because we actually had a situation recently of a 4-H member who made a mockery, who said actually his favorite activity in 4-H was making city kids look stupid. And that was really troublesome to hear. And I know that there have been conversations with that youth, and while he did not maybe intend it the way it came out, you're absolutely right, is that it is being respectful. There's a lot of things that our youth aren't going to know about other aspects of life. And so it is their role, as it is ours, as adults, to act as ambassadors of the 4-H program, and certainly of the agriculture industry in a situation like that. Good.
So the fact that they are there as a group and they need to stay together, and while they may not be interested in what we're looking at that particular time, we'll get to what they're interested in later.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's good. Yep, absolutely. And I think that's a great learning tool for them, that they will get a chance, all of them will get a chance to see what is important to them, and maybe have that conversation, because something like the Royal is huge, and so have the conversation around who wants to see what, and then have them plan how they're going to ensure that they get to see everything that everyone wants to see, but it becomes part of that decision making, and problem solving. It can be a judging activity right within your club. So we're going to have 6 hours to spend at the Royal. We've got 10 members, and here's what they want to do. How do we divide it out and engage the youth so that they have ownership of that, of what they're doing, and when they're doing it as well.
So Shelley here. I'm looking at it from more of the perspective that I'm there with a group of youth who have animals with them. So
Yes. Yep.
be it goats, cattle, and I'm thinking of it as more of sometimes you work in shifts. You're not always all there at the same time. So it's about, having a schedule before you even go to the event, who's going to be there in which hour, so who to expect to be in the building or at the hotel, to have a meeting place when you all arrive there the first day, should the fire alarm go off, which did last year actually. Yes. At one point during the fair. So just safety from that perspective, because parents won't always be in the building with you. They may not have even come on the trip to Toronto. So I think it's really important when everyone first arrives with their trailer of animals, let's say, to say, okay, this is where the trailer's parked. Should there be an emergency and we need to evacuate the building, this is our meeting point. Those types of things are all the things that I consider when you're in a big city setting like that, and it can be several thousands of people trying to leave the building at once. Because
Absolutely.
some of these kids are only 12 years old, right? So
yeah, and even 12, 14, 16, it's a totally different environment as well.
Yeah,
those are very, very good points, Shelley. In fact, do you mind if I email you afterwards to have you listen for me? I would love
sure.
to do a best practice. Thank you. Great. All right, let's go on to our second scenario. While on a 4-H club field trip, one of the parents accompanying the group is being negatively expressive to some of the youth. How do you address this behavior? Any suggestions? Any thoughts?
Sorry, Evelyn. Hi. Can you hear me? It's Jill.
Yes, I can hear you, Jill.
I'm trying to figure out this Zoom business. Sorry. Yeah, no, I think, how would you address that behavior? I think absolutely a discussion needs to happen with the member for sure, and as well with the parent. I would think, especially if things do not get any better.
Yeah, I think in a case like this, if it's a parent, they are along, and they have authority over their child and their child only, unless they are in the role of a chaperone. But here, the scenario is putting it to, the parent, being, accompanying the group, not in the chaperone position, and being negatively expressive to, to some of the youth. It does call for a conversation with that parent, taking them aside respectfully and just reminding them of what their role is, reminding them that 4-H is a positive youth experience, and just reminding them of of that and of their of their role as as well. Great. Next one. Okay. The Anywhere 4-H Association livestock team is working with their livestock at the local fair. The barn where the livestock is housed is open to the general public, and you notice some individuals taking pictures of the 4-H members. What do you do? Excuse me. Any thoughts?
It's Shelley here again. I think you, as the adult in the room, just have to walk up to that individual and ask them to delete them if they haven't asked for that 4-H member's permission. You know, some children, once again, the participation agreement comes into effect, where you know ahead of time of whether that child has consented to releasing any images publicly. But even if they've said yes to that, the child should still be asked before taking their picture. So you'd have to approach the individual and ask if they did that, ask the member if they'd asked their permission, and hope that they would have the good sense, so to speak, to agree to what you've asked them to do, which is to delete it. I mean, you can't make them do it short of taking their phone away from them, right? But I think it's important to address it for sure.
Absolutely. Other thoughts?
Even if they have signed the agreement to have their pictures taken, that's for 4-H. That's not by members of the public.
Yeah. I think the other piece is, you know, chaperones. And again, our world is it's bigger, it's broader, and it is definitely not the same world that that many of us grew up in. And there are people out there that have less than the best interest in mind for, you know, for youth, and I have heard of, you know, situations where there have been pictures taken of the stall cards above, you know, above a dairy display. In this case, it was a dairy display, for the sole purpose of being able to target those 4-H 4-H youth. So, you know, typically what you do is you know, you have the stall cards and you've got, you know, the name of the calf. So Chamberlain, Susie Smith, 4-H member, you know, Evelyn Chambers, and so they take pictures of that, and then they start tracking those people on social media through Facebook, Instagram, and unfortunately, that does lead then in many cases to the human trafficking, you know, issue as well. So again, just always being cognizant. It's having that awareness, you know, around you. It's not to put the fear into anyone that you don't want to, you know, chaperone, but just really to make sure that people have an understanding of what that role is, and in a situation like this, being mindful of what is happening to, you know, with your 4-H, you know, 4-H youth. Same situation. I mean, again, ensuring that the team is always working together, and there's, you know, no 4-H youth is being left out to the side, you know, of the team, of the pack. Just really making sure it is truly an inclusive experience will make it a whole lot safer for you know, for all the youth as, you know, as well. So finally, having gone through this, gone through the verbiage, is there any questions that anyone has, any scenarios that they want to run by, anything that I can help to address when it comes to the roles and responsibilities of chaperones?
Does it
I haven't.
Go ahead.
I haven't done one like the Royal, but if you have your group and you've got your 2 leaders or 2 chaperones for the 10 kids, but some of the kids are at the Royal and some of the kids are at the hotel, as Shelley was saying, you have to have double the chaperones then, or how does that work?
Ideally, yes. And keep in mind that you can have parents who are screen and trained who can fill in that role, but that is a really good example where 2 chaperones really aren't going to cut it. Is that if you've got, some youth back at the hotel because they've done a shift and they're not going to be showing until later on in the day, and you've got the next ones that are there at the at the show because they're going to be showing early. Yeah, it probably does make sense to get a couple of extra people to be screened and trained volunteers, rather than opening yourselves up to to any kind of a risk.
Okay.
I think the other piece that I also want to stress is be thinking about this, who your chaperones are going to be for for your events early in the year, and that will give opportunity for you to do that planning, to address the the risks that have been identified, and then be able to get people in place, get their training done, get their screening done, and the screening now being the police check as well as the commit to kids training, getting it done so it's not in a panic at the last minute trying to get everything done.
Hi, Neil here.
Yes.
Question on if you have the parent screen, like say if you're with, like there's two associations, like say Stormont and Glengarry are both at the Royal.
Right.
The Glengarry chaperones take some of the Stormont kids and the Stormont chaperones stay at the hotel till the rest of them come over. Would that be acceptable?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, as long as you keep it within those ratios that we talked about, like the
Yes.
the 10. But absolutely, and that's a great example, Neil, of sharing those responsibilities. So you're covering your bases. You've got the 4 chaperones, and everyone knows the role. And what's going to be important is that all the youth know who those chaperones are and who's going to be where and when. And that goes back to Shelley's comment. I think it was Shelley that your comment around having the schedules, schedules done up in advance. So 2 really great best practices that's shared. Thank you.
Is there an expectation that if there's girls and boys in the group that you have a male and female chaperone?
Absolutely. And it's more not an expectation, it is a requirement.
Okay, that's what I suspected. But
Yes. And I guess the other thing that, I haven't cited the entire chaperone policy, but I do encourage you, if you are going to be filling that role, if you're going out looking for volunteers to fulfill the role of, of chaperones, particularly for those overnight events, that you and they become familiar with that volunteer chaperone policy. All of our policies at 4-H Ontario are on the website. And if you go www.4-H-Ontario.ca, go to volunteers and click, and then the next pane that opens up on the right-hand side, you'll see a kind of a listing, how to get involved and volunteer opportunities. Midway through it will say policies and forms. And if you click that, you can go into then all of the 4-H Ontario policies, whether they're volunteer policies or member policies, they are all listed there. And I would strongly encourage everyone to take a review of those policies, and particularly the ones that we talked about with regards to being a chaperone. Also on that same page is where our forms are. So that is where you can get an extra code of conduct. You can download the incident form. All of those are also listed on the website and can be downloaded and then ready for your use. Any other questions?
Is there any special requirements if you're going to be driving the group? Like you don't have necessarily your own children, or you have your own children, but you have 3 or 4 others. Is there any extra in car insurance, driver insurance, anything like that you need to have?
As long as you have your own insurance. So in this case, it would be the operator, the owner operator of the vehicle. It would be their insurance that would come into play if there was an incident. So okay. As long as a driver A is insured and B has a legal license, no, there is no extra insurance that is required. Not from 4-H Ontario's end anyway. Let me put it that way.
Okay. Because it is quite a responsibility taking 7 or 8 kids to Toronto or whatever in the driving part.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And so, I mean, part of that, we're saying there's certainly no extra insurance, but when it comes to, insurance and it comes to risk management, it's really around doing the due diligence. So in a situation like this, while we're saying that, no, there's no extra insurance required, the due diligence does come into play. So is making sure that, there are seatbelts for all the youth. So, that does minimize the number of youth that can be taken. Making sure that luggage is packed, and stored safely. So, I mean, you don't necessarily want to have kids kind of packed in around a bunch of suitcases and knapsacks and, that sort of thing. Visual distraction, no visual distractions for the driver. So those are the due diligence pieces that I think maybe are probably common sense for the most part. And sometimes people don't think about that. But it is important to have those discussions, and this goes back to that pre-planning as well. So you're taking 3-4 youth with you plus your own luggage, so it's having the conversation with youth and saying, okay, so if whoever's riding with me, you're going to have we have this much room for for luggage and pack accordingly. Yeah, and always having those conversations in advance helps the member and helps the parents, and it helps you as the chaperone as well. And all of that leads then to a more positive experience, both for the youth as well as for yourselves as volunteers.
So going back, someone made a question about having a male and a female if you have mixed genders in your children. If you were doing one of the exchange clubs, so say you were, going to trade with a club out west or something,
yeah.
That involves that as well. You need to have a male leader as well as a female leader if you have male and female kids.
So the club-to-club exchange is actually run through 4-H Canada, and you would need to follow their chaperone policy rules. Yes.
All right. Okay.
And I think that raises a very good question that I'll just speak to, or a comment that I'll speak to, and that when we talk about our chaperone policies and roles and responsibilities, we are talking about 4-H, 4-H Ontario. But just as was said, there are numerous opportunities at a national level, at an international level, for our youth to travel where there are chaperones as well. So we heard about the club-to-club exchange. I happen to know that the U.S. Members Conference, there is a chaperone that goes from, I think it's Canada. I think there's a couple of them from Canada. The 4-H Canada Members Forum, there is chaperones from the various provinces, but those are all national events. So anything that is a national event that is basically organized and run by 4-H Canada, the compliance has to be based on what their policies, are. Same sort of thing if a youth is going, on an international type of opportunity, travel opportunity, those rules would apply as well. So I think it's really important to understand the levels, of 4-H, and therefore the levels of responsibility that may come into play with if you are a chaperone in any of those types of events. So it's always good to read the guidelines and not assume that, well, in 4-H Ontario I just have to do this, and then there should be no expectation that would be the same for anything beyond 4-H Ontario. Any other questions, comments?